Hi, this is Brenda Herchmer. Welcome to FF105, Measuring Success, Part 3. And in Part 3, we're going to discuss types of evaluation. And in addition to that, I'm going to share with you a number of real-life examples that illustrate these different types of evaluation. And I think that you may find that it clarifies any confusion that you might be feeling up until now about evaluation. I know this is something that got me bogged down for a number of years, so hopefully my sharing will be helpful for you. So here's what I've learned. There are basically 3 different types of evaluation. This is really important for you as a community leader because often you may have someone within your department or organization who can help you with the evaluation. A lot of times with projects you're hiring outside evaluators. So you need to be able to ask for the kind of evaluation that you see as being needed to be put into place. So the 3 types are process, outcome, and developmental. And I write them in that order and describe them that way because it creates an acronym of POD. And that's actually how I remember them, as POD, process, outcome, and developmental. Process is also known as formative evaluation. And that's really what we're gathering data and evaluating in order to be able to refine what we're doing and making it more efficient and effective. So it's about refinement. Outcome or summative evaluation is about judging the worth or the value that's being delivered. And the third, which is newer, but is really important to understand when we are dealing with the complex issues that many community leaders are dealing with. The first form of evaluation that we're going to dig into a little bit deeper is process or formative evaluation. This is the most common and for most people is the one that they are most likely to be familiar with. It's really the kind of evaluation that gives you the information and the data that you need to provide the answer to the question, did you do what you said you were going to do? So it's not so much whether or not you had an impact, it's really about the process and the outputs. So it's about whether or not you've hit your targets and implemented the strategies as you had planned them. Really, it is really simply did you do what you said you were going to do? And you typically do this at the end of the program or the project, but you do look at the entirety of the program or the initiative. And this really gives you the information that you need for how best to revise and modify for improvement as you move forward. The process or formative objectives, they typically, this is the kind of evaluation that typically deals with such things as, who did you reach? Who did you recruit? The levels of participation, the resources that you accumulated, the different activities of the program and the outputs, stakeholder issues, participant concerns, your successes and your challenges. So it is pretty straightforward. And so here are some examples of some process or formative objectives that for each of those categories. So it will give you an idea when you are putting together your own questions. So these are just intended for you as examples, and I'm not going to go through them one by one because you can take a look at that simply by stopping the video. So here's an example, and I think this was a really clever one because it was pretty efficient and effective way of gathering program data on a daily basis. And so it was very much about quantifiable data, but it also it used including ages and the numbers of volunteers and leaders and participants, that kind of thing. So pretty straightforward, one pager, so it's doable. So evaluation doesn't have to be that complicated or time consuming. I also like this form. This is an evaluation of an out trip, And I really did appreciate this one because it was quite simple, but it collected a lot of data, both quantitative and qualitative. So again, it's an example of a kind of tool that you can use that doesn't necessarily have to involve a lot of time and energy. Here's another one for a summer camp, and it does, again, it's very simple and straightforward, but great data to help you improve. And that's what process evaluation is about. How can you be more effective? How can you be more efficient? So this is an important form of evaluation. And the other way, we do gather a lot of this through surveys, but there are common errors in designing surveys, and so I just want to make you aware of that, but also know that there's a lot of information out there in terms of designing good questions, and so keep that in mind if you are planning to do surveys. The second form of evaluation are outcomes or summative evaluations, and this is different from did you do what you said you were going to do. It is instead about are you making a difference? Are you having an impact? And so this is why outcomes are so important to really put into place at the beginning, because you need to be clear about what it is you're aiming for and then assess them at the end of the operating cycle. So longer term changes are things like positive change in physical health or well-being, or is there a sense of community connectedness? Is there improved quality of life? Is there increases in community involvement, or a new clarification for public sector policies, that kind of thing. And quite often the outcomes are referred to as two different types: outcome evaluation and impact evaluation. And the biggest difference with those is that impact evaluation looks at longer term impact and broader changes. That it takes more time, and the outcomes evaluations are really about immediate or more outcomes. So those are the ones that we've talked about primarily, that relate to knowledge or change in attitude, behaviors, or risk, or academic achievement, or physical activity, or social ability, or confidence, those kinds of things. So those are the kinds of things that you would be looking at for summative or outcome evaluation. So, and here again, some examples that really can show you, you can add a percentage so you can measure improvement, but it's generally their perception. You cannot necessarily control it. You can't control their capacity, but you can definitely influence it, and their perception of whether or not they've improved and able to form activities often comes from themselves or those who are close to them, perhaps a therapist, for example. So those are some examples that may help you as you design your own evaluation tools. And the same with this slide shares some additional examples. So the other thing that we've talked about are the importance of outcomes. Not only the outcomes, but the indicators that will show you how you've achieved that outcome. So this is important to understand because this will help you shape the data that you collect. And in this case, we've used an outcome that says 70% of retreat participants enhance their competencies for community leadership. So that's the outcome that you're looking for, is that they will show an improvement in the competencies that you've articulated are important for community leadership. So how will you know they've got there? Well, it means that the leaders can describe what leadership competencies they're good at, and they can also know where they need more work and how they can plan. They will have a plan for both A and B. So that's an example of indicators. And the actual actions of local leaders can reflect the competency as well. So it's just drilling down more and getting more detail that will tell you that outcome is on its way to being achieved. There we go. Okay, and the other thing that I wanted to share with you is that there's a lot of times there is secondary data already out there that you can use, and some amazingly sophisticated use of technology. This one is in Toronto, and I would just really encourage you to check it out as an example of how data can be collected and shared and utilized. So this is called Raising the Village, and it's a map of Toronto. It's an interactive map, and it shows outcomes and indicators as well as the demographics, which is a secondary source. So take a look at that and you'll get a better idea of outcomes and indicators. There's another one from Winnipeg, which is really powerful in terms of the health of people who live in Winnipeg. So keep an eye out for those kinds of tools because they're getting far more sophisticated and are being utilized more. So the third form of evaluation that I want to share is really important for complicated issues. It's called developmental evaluation. And this is not necessarily about making a program better, but it's to do something innovative because there's a need to adapt. So typically there are fewer expectations up front. So it's not necessarily about cause and effect. It's really about keeping an eye on what is emerging and what can be corrected kind of as you go. So a lot of times there isn't a prescribed methodology, which sometimes can be challenging, but it's really about a journey that focuses on possibilities and aspirations and vision. And the complex challenges are going to, in our communities, are going to require more of this kind of evaluation. That's why it's important to understand. And there's a great primer, if you want to learn more, that was developed by the McConnell Foundation. And it's a great PDF that you can download for free. And it goes into more detail about this. But keep this in mind because it's so essential, because it goes beyond traditional evaluation. You know, traditional evaluation is typically plan and then act and then evaluate. It's very linear, and it's not as challenging, and it can be quite rewarding because, you know, it's linear and it's logical and it makes sense. But the reality of it is that a lot of what we're dealing with right now doesn't always make sense. So this is more of you plan and you act and you evaluate. So it all kind of happens concurrently, and it is more like ready. You know, I think traditional approach is ready, aim, fire, and developmental approach is more ready, fire, aim. So it is quite different. So you can do this in a lot of different ways. I have personally found the most powerful is individual and group interviews because people kind of riff off one another. There's a lot of reflection that happens within the team. There's verbal material, written material, and it's really about clarifying what has and hasn't happened. So it's starting to see different patterns. And I think for me, what is imperative to understand, and what was so enlightening, was the acknowledgement of intuitive learnings. So it wasn't always fact-based, but when it acknowledged the importance of seeing, feeling, hearing. So it's mostly qualitative data, but there's some quantitative data as well. But the developmental evaluation is something to be on the lookout for and to understand. So these are some examples, and these are ones that I pulled from my own projects over the last number of years. And so these are examples of developmental outcomes. And so they are a little fuzzier, but you can articulate outcomes at the beginning of a complicated project. And you'll see where these fit in. So I'm going to show you some examples in the next part 4, which is about presenting the results. So you'll see how these different kind of evaluations come together with concrete examples. You'll see some results. There you go. That's it for now. Stay tuned.